So what were the stressors that impacted on-shelf availability of dairy products? And by dairy products, I'm going to talk about cow's milk products specifically, and I will talk about a lot about milk. So we saw a huge increase in demand. People changed their behaviors. They were now, remember when we talked about panic buying, they didn't know how long they would be stuck in their homes. But they also changed their behavior in terms of at-home consumption versus away-from-home consumption of anywhere from 1 to 3 meals a day. So now we were having 3 meals at home versus away from the house. So that increased demand. Along with that increase of demand was the availability of packaging. So when you think about milk, milk has been on about a 10-year decline despite its high household penetration of about 96% of households purchasing milk. It's still the amount that we were drinking was declining. So your processors are basing their forecasting off of those consumption patterns. Well, all of a sudden the consumption patterns changed. And so the packaging availability became an issue, not only on milk, but also on products such as sour cream and yogurt. And you might have seen those out of stocks in your stores as well. Also then processing capacity became an issue. So when we talk about the fact that 50% of volume went away, a whole channel of distribution shut down. So food service from restaurants to schools to institutions, it's impacted anyone you've heard from today on this webinar. So all of that went away, but the problem was those products that were, and I know we've heard this from other panelists today, is those products that were packaged for food service, they're not retail packages. The retail packaging of milk, that processing capacity was already running at 24/7. It couldn't add any additional capacity to those lines. And the food service processing lines couldn't take on retail packaging. So what you might have heard a lot about taking place out there, a lot of news stories on farmers being asked by their co-ops to dump milk. And it breaks my heart. I was disheartened by what we all saw during these last several months of this incredible food abundance that occurred because of a shutdown of a distribution channel at the same time where we had a huge influx of food insecure and people waiting for hours in mile-long lines to get food from a food bank. So I'm going to talk about some very clear problems here. It might sound like I'm complaining or criticizing, but I also want to talk about some solutions that maybe we can look at for the future and using what we've lived through here as a case study so that when this happens again, not if, because the word is it will happen again, that we are prepared with a contingency plan that will leave everybody in a win-win-win situation. The farmers will not be asked to dump their milk and hurt economically because of that. Processors will have the capacity that they need to turn to for processing, and consumers, of course, will win because there won't be out of stocks on the shelf. When you're working with an animal in animal agriculture, we can't just turn off the milk. So while demand went up, but a whole channel of distribution went away, we couldn't turn off the cows. The cows kept making milk, and we just couldn't get it to the people that needed it. A lot of this resulted in allocations. I heard of processors who were putting their retailers on allocation and retailers who were limiting consumers to how much milk they could buy when they were in the store. You can only imagine how frustrating that was to dairy farmers who couldn't understand, well, we have this abundance of milk, why can't we let everybody buy as much as they want? And it stems back to just not having processing capabilities. The stressors of the demand, the packaging availability, the processing capacity, and the allocations that were caused by this shutdown. The retail package shortages. I'm reviewing my notes here. That I want to make sure I don't leave anything off. What I want to talk about as solutions, and having been in the dairy industry for the last 10 years, is how do we prepare for an event like this going forward? The dairy industry does an amazing job. And when I talk about the industry, I talk a lot about the USDA program, and the dairy associations. They do an amazing job at crisis preparedness. I was involved in many crisis preparedness drills over those 10 years. The difference I would love to see on those drills going forward is just a change of what that crisis might look like. The crisis drills that we always did were around the topic if something were to happen that negatively impacted the consumption of dairy products. For example, a nuclear plant meltdown. What would that, an animal abuse video, things that, events that would occur in the environment, man-made or otherwise, that would impact consumers' confidence in the product that they were consuming, the dairy products that they were consuming. And how would we handle that with the media? How would we handle that in terms of any decrease of consumption on the part of consumers? We never did a drill that would train us and prepare us for something that might happen that would increase the demand of our products, or that potentially would shut down a channel of distribution that would again shift that increase of demand to another channel of distribution. So my proposal, and I've wrote about it several times and certainly spoken about it, is that change of focus on that crisis preparedness. How do we use what we just lived here to be the case study for future success? And then also one of the things that I would love to see is processing solutions. So how would a processor take their production, their processing equipment that is currently used for food service, that once that channel went away, it sat dormant and it couldn't be reconfigured in a fast, flexible way to process the retail packaging? So is there a solution for that, working with processing equipment manufacturers to make equipment more flexible to be able to switch it to different types of packaging? The plant capacity, how could they produce that excess product? Is it a matter of actually owning other facilities that the dairy, perhaps it's the dairy industry as a whole through associations, purchases I'll call them dark facilities, so that when there is this abundance of milk, it can actually be processed into products that would either go into the retail channel or into the food banks. I would like to call out, there was a processor who again, it took several months, but they were able to, as a local processor, they were able to secure some processing lines for shelf-stable product. And that might also be a solution for this in the future, is that morphing of products from the fresh that we deal with so much into more shelf-stable products. A local processor had done that, and it's a single-serve shelf-stable product, and they're also making it an effort for the food banks as well. So when you buy one of these shelf-stable products, they will donate one to the local food shelf. So that was great. Again, it took several months to get that rolling. I would hope that it would be a case study for the future. And really, when you take all of that information, I have this last on my list, but it's probably a priority, is what happens when there is a snowstorm or there is a hurricane coming? What is it that drives the consumer behavior to run to the grocery store to stock up on these staples like milk and yogurt and bread and comfort foods? Is there an analysis that we can do about consumer behavior? Now is the time to step back. The milk industry dealing with that decline of gallon fluid milk, dealing with that decline prior to the pandemic, but seeing increases of it during the pandemic when consumer behaviors changed. What's the learning from that?